How's it going, dudes? Can't satisfy your hunger for legal drama with one set of board game lawsuits? Then just invent yourself a sequel and get right back in there! Anti-Monopoly 2 is the sequel to the 1973 smash hit Anti-Monopoly, actually coming out during the legal maelstrom between Ralph Anspach and Parker Brothers, which is a pretty bold play to say the least. Now look, I'm not saying I don't respect y'all as an opponent, but I am developing an entire other game on the side. What with the convoluted legal history of the Anti-Monopoly brand, Anti-Monopoly 2 does have its own vast swaths of whack crap, including the single most complicated naming convention in the history of the genre and a push to completely destroy the largest board game manufacturer in the industry. So let's continue the tale of Anti-Monopoly's lawsuit-led life by peering into the past and future of the one who stole the mantle, Anti-Monopoly 2. Before we can look into the nonsense that this game caused, we need to get to know a little bit about the game itself. Anti-Monopoly 2 is the 1977 game that sees players take up the roles of either competitors or monopolists as they try to navigate the tricky real estate market. Each player follows a different set of rules for how they can conduct business. And when all of the players of one group go bankrupt, the richest player of the other group wins. Okay, so if Anti-Monopoly 1 was found to be infringing on the Monopoly trademark, this game is taking that sucker and using it as a personal checklist. All this game is just playing standard Monopoly with two different sets of rules. You purchase properties that you land on, you build houses to increase the price of rent, you can mortgage or trade properties if you're short on cash, there are chance type spaces, there's income tax, there's a $75 tax space, there's the gosh dang electric company. Heck, they even did one better on modern Monopoly and kept a railroad this time. Finally, some respect around here. This is about as infringing as you can get without outright repackaging the game board and calling it Monopoly 2. And a reminder that they released this while the first game was actively being sued for trademark infringement. As you can probably guess, this caused quite a lot of confusing nonsense to happen, as we'll get into later. For now, let's take a look at the major selling point for the game, the Monopoly versus competitor rivalry. In the game, each set of players follows a different set of rules. Monopolies will have different penalties than competitors, and vice versa. So it is up to you to choose which team you think will give you the best chance of winning. I'll describe both, and you tell me which team you would rather be on. Starting off, the Monopolies are getting beaten into the dirt here. Nearly every negative effect in the game is way worse for the Monopolies than it is for the competitors. Here's a list of disadvantages that you can look forward to for controlling the barriers to entry. You can only build on properties when you own at least 2 of a color set. Competitors can build on any that they own. You need to pay 20% of your cash when hitting income tax, while competitors need only pay 10%. When you land on Anti-Monopoly Foundation, you lose $160. When a competitor lands there, they roll to see if they gain money. And if you own 2 of the 3 properties of a color set, but someone else owns the 3rd, you cannot collect money from your houses until you get that property off of them. Basically, if you are playing as a Monopoly, you are going to get swindled at every turn by effects trying to keep you down. Playing as one of these sounds miserable. That being said, I am absolutely picking them if given the choice. You see, the competitors are going to be running circles around these guys in the early game due to all the beatings that are getting dished out. But once the Monopolies can start building up, buddy, you are in for a bad time. The Monopolies only really have 2 advantages, but they are massive. First, they only need to put 3 houses down before they can build a hotel, which will save them hundreds of dollars in the long term. And second, their monopoly on the market comes in clutch when shaking down those buyers, as they charge double the rent price of the competitors. Wow, it's almost like the game is trying to convey some sort of message, or lesson, or lecture. At that point, it doesn't matter how many silly effects the other team has. This will not only make it easier to raise funds to continue building for a snowball effect, but the lower price for the comps means that the Monops will be way harder to land a finishing blow on. Being able to build anywhere won't matter too much when they're only losing $50 every time they land there. This is why the general consensus is that the competitors have the early game advantage and need to use that to keep the monopolies in check, as if they get any form of leverage, they are going to steamroll this bad boy and not look back. The chance type cards for this one are divided based on what team you are on and carry the standard effects that you would expect from this kind of game, with some of them carrying over some of that classic anti-monopoly snark. A monopolist who injured your business has settled with the Justice Department with a consent decree. This means that you won't be able to collect damages. Congratulations on your moral victory! Man, nothing really sets the tone for a game like a card that does. Absolutely nothing. The last thing that I wanted to mention is that while this game does have some interesting parts to it, I don't really think that it is quite as good as the original. That game has a ton of unique mechanics and rules that really help it stand out as its own experience. This is really just Monopoly with a few new rules. Now granted, they didn't biff it quite as hard as some of the other Monopoly titles out there, but if I wanted to play Monopoly, I'd just play Monopoly. But now that we know what this game has on offer, let's jump into what happened after its creation and why it decided to launch one of the most heartbreaking betrayals against its own brother. So, in case you missed it the first couple times, this game released during the trademark infringement lawsuit of Anti-Monopoly 1, more specifically coming out prior to the first appeal from the Ninth Circuit. Well, after the first court ruled in favor of the Parker brothers, you really can't just keep using an infringing name for your game. So what ended up happening is that Ralph had to change the names for both Anti-Monopoly and Anti-Monopoly 2 until the full proceedings were over. As such, Anti-Monopoly would continue to be produced as Anti, and Anti-Monopoly 2 would originally be published as Choice. Doesn't quite have the same marketable ring to it, does it? After the Parker brothers got absolutely screwed by the Ninth Circuit, Ralph was able to once again use the word Monopoly in his titles, with Anti-Monopoly returning to its former glory and Choice now taking up the name Anti-Monopoly 2. And everything from this point on was sunshine and rainbows all the way up until everything started to fall apart. Crazy how that tends to happen. Now, the Anti-Monopoly brothers were not impacted by the Parker brothers lobbying to change the trademark law. Even though the Parkers got their trademark back, Anti-Monopoly was unaffected by this for one reason or another. What they did end up getting affected by, though, was consumer confusion due to their own naming scheme. See, board games don't work quite like movies or video games. When you release a sequel to those, people want to see it or buy it because they are likely going to get more of the original, probably with some improvements or more story. A sequel to a board game, however, is going to need to change up some critical things in order to justify the fact that it exists at all. So people that like the original aren't as ready to pick it up as if they like the original game, they're going to keep playing the original game. A good example of this is when Uno released its sequel, Dos. It didn't perform as well as the original like you'd expect from a movie sequel, because people didn't really want to play Dos, they wanted to play Uno. As such, Anti-Monopoly 2 was starting to struggle a bit in terms of the sales figures, and Ralph decided that that was mainly due to that naming convention. So what do you do when you've got two good products that are eating into each other due to a naming scheme that you yourself set? Why, you kill off the original version entirely and give its name to its brother, of course. You killed him! He's dead! Yeah, but there was really no other way. There were several other ways! Anti-Monopoly 1 absolutely did not need to die here. The problem stemmed from Anti-Monopoly 2's name getting in the way, which it had for less time than it was called Choice. You could absolutely just change the name again to clear up the confusion without needing to completely eradicate the version of the game that brought the company its success. And now if any current fans try to buy or recommend the game, they're gonna be confused as to why their two copies of Anti-Monopoly are completely different. Anti-Monopoly went through nearly 10 years of legal beatings in order to earn the right to use that name, and then right after, it got long live the kinged by its own brother, who then just took up the mantle. Unbelievable. As a result of this treachery, Anti-Monopoly 2, which will from this point on be referred to as Anti-Monopoly, did see a considerable bump in sales, going from around 12,000 units sold in 1986 to around 42,000 units sold in 1989. This, however, would be the peak of our board-based betrayer, as the very next year, sales would plummet to the point that legal action would be pursued. All of this joy, of course, stemming from the actions of the one who holds the fun, the Hasbro Corporation. But before we see what our old enemy has done this time, let's check in once again on an old friend with today's sponsor, FlexiSpot. This is the fourth gosh dang time that I have worked with FlexiSpot because they keep making good stuff, and that mantra continues to hold true with their newest offering, the E7L. The E7L is the L-shaped desk perfect for getting your space set up not only horizontally, but also vertically. As if your back is giving you the old spinal curve, then just stand up straight and have your desk join you. The E7L allows you to manipulate the height of the desk freely or add your own presets based on what you need, and can support up to 330 pounds if you're ever looking to turn work time into nap time. With chipboard or bamboo options, the desktop can fit any style you are looking for, with me preferring the chipboard with storage so that I can have my most needed items close by at all times. Head on over to Flexispot.com to see which E7L would help optimize your space. And be sure to use my code on screen to make sure that you are getting the best price. Have you and your desk rise to the occasion with FlexiSpot today. Thank you again to FlexiSpot for sponsoring this video. Now let's go from raising the desk to raising my blood pressure by seeing how these goobers ended up in court this time around. Seeing as we've been talking about anti-monopoly for several minutes and no one's been sued yet, Ralph decided to remedy this problem by taking Hasbro to court on, believe it or not, an antitrust action. You telling me they killed off the antitrust version and then used the replacement to launch an antitrust lawsuit? We had the perfect storyline, come on! As such, we are now right back into the legal documents portion of the research, but instead of trying to make sense of trademark law, I now have to contend with antitrust law, and the language is just as confusing as ever. I am more confident in my understanding of this case than the last one though, so once again I will try to do my best to relay the information in a way that you might be able to comprehend. Once again though, no promises. So grab your popcorn and pick your champion, as it's time for Anti-Monopoly Inc. versus Hasbro Incorporated, Southern District Court of New York. As with most lawsuits, the first part consists of a factual background in order to catch everyone up to speed. Which, I kid you not, they start off with a section called The Rise and Fall of Anti-Monopoly. Truly ahead of their time. All you need now is some dramatic lighting and some dark music and you've got a video right there. Most of the information here is the stuff I've previously covered, but there are some new events that took place that will help set the stage. After its 42,000 unit peak in 1989, Anti-Monopoly would be dropped by mass retailers like True and Kmart, their reasoning being that they thought that the game lacked consumer appeal. And if there's anyone that knows what the consumers want, it's Kmart. This move would, shocker, have a negative impact on the game's sales figures, as they only sold 3,400 copies in 1990 and haven't reached 3,000 in a year since. As we mentioned before, at some point Parker Brothers bought the anti-monopoly trademark and licensed it back to Ralph's company AMI to be sold on the market. And in 1991, Parker Brothers was acquired by Hasbro, which put it under their umbrella. Once the distribution agreement with their current company ran out, Ralph approached Hasbro with a proposition, which putting it in quotes makes it very mysterious, to market Anti-Monopoly through Milton Bradley, who Hasbro also owned. Dang, these Hasbro guys own quite a lot of the board game market. I sure hope that that doesn't become extremely relevant soon. Hasbro then said, no, to Ralph's request, after which Ralph suddenly realized that the present market share and power of Hasbro gives it a better chance of success than if a board game were marketed by another manufacturer. Accordingly, from a business standpoint, there is an element of guarantee inherent in Hasbro's monopolistic position, and sued Hasbro with an antitrust action for violating, among other things, the Sherman Act, the Clayton Act, the Robinson-Patman Act, and state law. Hasbro moves to dismiss these claims on the basis of nuh-uh. What is funny here is that the timing of the antitrust lawsuit from Ralph is so suspicious that before we've even made it out of the background section, the judge is already theorizing. Perhaps the explanation for this lawsuit is Hasbro's refusal to market Anti-Monopoly. We literally haven't even started the suit yet, and the judge is already like, alright, this seems pretty sus, but we'll proceed as normal just in case. Keep an eye on him though. Finishing up the legally defined rise and fall of anti-monopoly, we now get to look into the board game industry as a whole. A pretty important picture which both parties are already trying to warp in their favor. AMI's papers are replete with conclusory statements and lack organization and coherence. Hasbro's papers, in contrast, strategically omit any comprehensive discussion of the board game industry. Okay guys, we literally just got started. Can't we just have a nice controversy-free trial this time?
No.
They did eventually end up finding some non-biased facts to help them out, so here's what the board game market looked like back in 1997. In terms of Hasbro's market share, I'm not even sure where Ralph got the idea of a monopoly, as at the time, Hasbro only controlled a measly 70% of the family board game market. Good lord, man, 70%? Did Mr. Monopoly buy off the FTC? What in the world? For reference, the next highest family board game manufacturer at the time was Tyco, commanding a market share of less than 10%. So if you would please consult the graph, yeah, I'd say this is pretty competitive. In addition to that bombshell, it's also determined that Hasbro owns nearly 55% of all games sold at True and Kmart, and over 70% of games sold at Walmart and Target, and held ownership over all 5 of the best-selling games of 1993. I do think that Ralph mainly sued because he's mad that they rejected his offer, but at the same time, Hasbro's market share is absolutely absurd! But in order for anything to be done about the Hasbro situation, the court would need to find that Anti-Monopoly's claims are true. So let's find out exactly what they are claiming. Claim 1, retailer discrimination. Ralph claims that Hasbro is helping drive other smaller retailers out by offering advertising discounts, supplying only mass retailers with personnel to help stock items, and providing them a preview of products which are not offered to smaller stores. This is found to be partially true. Claim 2, hot holdings. Ralph claims that Hasbro refuses to sell its more popular games to stores unless they also carry some of their lower performing games. The president of Hasbro confirms this himself, saying that allowing a retailer to purchase only the cream of the crop would be harmful for our business. Claim 3, price fixing. Ralph claims that Hasbro conspires with mass retailers to fix prices by offering markdowns on lower performing games in order to ensure that the store still turns a profit when working with them. This ends up not being as impactful as several small retailers were also given these markdowns. And claim 4, volume discount. Ralph claims that Hasbro offers volume discounts for retailers that buy more Hasbro products, which pushes smaller manufacturers out as an option since they cannot offer the same, which is anti-competitive. This sounds nice and all, but it doesn't get too far as AMI has provided no factual support for its theory. Yeah, that'll do it. So a bit of a mixed bag there on the claims, but it is up to the courts as to whether these findings constitute Hasbro being in violation of antitrust law. Which, if they were, would cause quite a few issues for Hasbro, what with their entire business practice being ruled illegal. So let's see what they have to say, starting with the most pressing of these issues, that totally nothing to worry about 70% market share. The big things to see here are whether Hasbro has control over a significant amount of the market and or if it has the ability to control the barriers to entry, either of which would make them anti-competitive. So obviously with holding 70% of the market share, Hasbro would most certainly be able to hold significant market power. But what we need to determine right now is if family board games is a market big enough where that kind of market power would make an actual impact. While Hasbro does have this massive holding in that niche, in the broader toys and games market, they are getting absolutely curb stomped by Mattel, to the point where they don't even have a quarter of the market share for that group. So if they were to try any truly monopolistic plays like price gouging the customers, Mattel and the other board game competitors would absolutely decimate them. It's like this. I currently have a 100% monopoly on blue hat wearing bad board game coverage, but if I tried to use that to take over the board game coverage market as a whole, I would get atomized. What they also need to decide is whether or not Hasbro's control on the family board game market would allow them to control areas like barriers to entry, which they ultimately decided that they can't. While Hasbro does have a lot of leverage being the biggest manufacturer, the barriers to entry for making a new game are pretty low since there are plenty of companies and individuals that can assist in the development, production, and marketing of a new game, indicating that even a manufacturer with little experience in the industry could still introduce a game. This is backed up by recent market data and trade magazines, and they even bring forward that a lot of the most successful games in recent years were made by small independent publishers, like Mind Trap, Brain Quest, Pictionary, and Trivial Pursuit. It honestly could not be going any worse for Anti-Monopoly right now, especially when they get hit with the classic. The court notes that AMI's evidence relating to barriers to entry is non-specific and largely speculative, while Hasbro's evidence is based on actual market participants. Unrebutted evidence that actual competitors have entered the market is a strong indicator that Hasbro lacks market power. Dude, somebody has got to shut this guy up. We are getting freaking murdered out here. Surprisingly, despite the language pointing to the entire case ending right here, the judge's curiosity gets the better of him as he makes his next call. Okay, so we've got like 3 more things that we should probably look through, and if we shut this point down now, then we're not going to get to look at any of those. So what we're going to do here is say that hypothetically Hasbro does have market power, we'll continue the trial as normal, and we'll see what happens from there. Everybody good? Great? Solid. Thus, the court assumes, for the purposes of the instant motions, that Hasbro has market power in the family board game market. I'm really not worried at all. And so the trial continues. Up next, we're looking at antitrust standing as it relates to anti-monopoly specifically. Ralph is looking to recover damages, and in order to do that, the court must evaluate the plaintiff's harm, the alleged wrongdoing by the defendants, and the relationship between them. Alright, I know we had a rough start, team, but if we can turn things around, we can at least walk out of here with a decent paycheck. Give it your all, leave it all in the court, break. 1. Alleged discrimination. AMI has not clearly articulated how it is injured by Hasbro's allegedly discriminatory practices. Alright boys, it's a good try, we'll get them on the appeal. I mean, they are getting destroyed in literally every single segment of this. AMI's argument appears to rely on the fact that the retail market for family board games is being consolidated by a few mass retailers. Because this consolidation is causing the smaller retailers to go out of business, AMI allegedly cannot succeed by selling to only the smaller retailers. The court notes that if AMI's theory of injury to small retailers based on Hasbro's alleged unjustified discriminatory conduct were correct, it is somewhat curious that the small retailers have not instituted an action on their own behalf. Moreover, AMI has not provided factual support for its claim that the purported retailer consolidation is related to the Hasbro practices about which AMI complains. Because AMI lacks antitrust standing to pursue its discrimination claims, the court grants Hasbro's motion for summary judgment. Honestly, we might need to speed this segment up, as you can only watch someone get pummeled into the ground for so long before the ref just has to call the match. 2. Pricing practices. To sustain its claim for predatory pricing, AMI must prove 1. That Hasbro's prices are below an appropriate measure of Hasbro's costs, and 2. That Hasbro has a dangerous probability of recouping its investment in below-cost prices. AMI has not provided factual support for either element of a below-cost pricing antitrust claim. Instead, AMI theorizes that Hasbro can achieve instant recoupment by pricing Monopoly below cost. Hasbro allegedly achieves this instant recoupment when the consumer enters True to buy Monopoly, but then decides to buy another Hasbro product. Bro, what are you talking about? So what Hasbro is allegedly doing is marketing Monopoly at a price so low that Hasbro would lose money on it. A customer sees this and decides to go to the store to buy it. They see the cheap Monopoly but decide that they don't want it. They see a different Hasbro game that is sold at a standard price and decide that they will buy that instead, just like Hasbro drew it up. I gotta say, whichever Hasbro exec pitched that one at the meetings better have gotten a raise. What a play! The distinct and significant problem with all of AMI's antitrust claims is that they lack factual support in the record. Accordingly, all of AMI's antitrust claims are dismissed. Wow, I really don't like his chances, but if you were to live bet the Professor moneyline right now, you would get some great odds. For the reasons set forth above, Hasbro's motion for summary judgment dismissing AMI's second amended complaint is granted. The court also grants Hasbro's motion for judgment on the pleadings dismissing AMI's secondary line Robinson-Patman Act claims. The other pending motions are disposed of in the above memorandum and order or are dismissed as moot. Oh, we won? No way, that's crazy. I'm gonna be honest here, with how this case started out, I thought we were gonna have some crazy back and forth brawl with controversial decisions just like the last one. Instead, Hasbro barely had to do anything as the Professor's team kinda just tripped over themselves until they hit the wall for a KO. It's not like they didn't have any experience in a courtroom before. These are the same people that beat Parker Brothers. So they at least know to not just jump in there and start making claims with no evidence. Yet here they stand spinning some tale about Hasbro's fourth dimensional plan to trick people into buying every game except the one they are interested in? This was such a massacre that I don't even see the need for an appeal. There is no way that that would go any better. Did somebody say appeal? Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Anti-Monopoly Inc. versus Hasbro Incorporated, The Appeal, Second Circuit Court of Appeals. To give you an idea of what we are dealing with here, the first appeal for Anti-Monopoly 1 was 12 pages long, with the second appeal for that case doing one better at a solid 13 pages. This appeal comes out to a grand total of 6 entire sentences, so you know it's good. They spend longer recapping the previous case than they do actually talking about the appeal, which reads out in its entirety as such. We have considered all of plaintiffs' challenges to the district court's rulings and have found in them no basis for reversal. We affirm substantially for the reasons stated in Judge McKenna's memorandum and order, the judgment of the district court is affirmed. Could you imagine how much easier the last case would have been if we just had the Second Circuit Court instead of the Ninth? No more bloated 13-page nonsense monstrosity of a document, just a nice 3-word Parker Brothers dies. Seeing that this one was absolutely not going to have the same run as the first Anti-Monopoly, Ralph would relent and Hasbro would go back to business as normal, allowing them to make terrible Monopoly revamps for many years to come. But with everything that we have been through, the drama, the lawsuits, the betrayals, it kind of makes me wonder, where is Anti-Monopoly now? Well, Anti-Monopoly 1 is still dead. Turns out when you kill someone, they kinda tend to stay dead for a while. Aw, now you tell me! But as for the new Anti-Monopoly, it is still alive and kicking. Having at some point started being sold by University Games, this title is still in production to this very day. Heck, they've even managed to put together a Travel 10 version if you want that hot Monopoly trouncing action with you on the go. You can actually even still buy these versions off of their website if you want. I'll put a link below if you want to take a look. I'm just really surprised that it is still going. Unbelievably though, we still have some controversy left in this series, with this round of drama mainly coming from me, as I've got quite a bone to pick with this new rendition. Firstly, you can see in the corner here that Anti-Monopoly is still owned by the Hasbro Corporation. It is just being licensed out to University Games, I guess so that they don't have to put their logo on the box. Well, to be fair, I would rather have them do this than have them let the game die altogether, so I really can't be too mad at Hasbro this time. What I am pretty miffed about though is the game's description, or rather, what is missing from it. On the back of the box, you get a standard description of the game's theme and the message behind it, as well as this curious little blurb at the top that reads the following. Ready for an update to the Monopoly folk game invented by Elizabeth Maggie 100 years ago? It's a twist right out of today's headlines. Free market competitors clash with ruthless monopolists. Well, this is cool. They're helping bring attention to the first version of Monopoly. Neat. But then you keep reading, and you keep looking, and you eventually come to realize that it might not be here at all. And that's because it isn't, as nowhere on the box nor the site for the game is the history of the original Anti-Monopoly mentioned in any way. They have completely paved over the history of the original game. Its massive initial success, the tense legal back and forth, the surprise win over the corporate giant, and they've done this to make way for the storyline that this version is and always has been anti-monopoly. Heck, Maggie's name is plastered all over the site and the box, but the best Ralph gets is one mention in a background segment of the rulebook. You know, Ralph Onspach, the creator of the gosh dang game. Just like how Maggie was back with the original Monopoly, Ralph's story is slowly being phased out of his own game in order to make way for a fresher, more marketable tale. Ironically, this one being focused around Maggie herself. And this is such a huge disappointment, as the original Anti-Monopoly story is way more interesting. But the only way you can learn about it is through court documents and dubiously sourced documentaries. Heck, you can't even look up the game anymore, let alone play it, because the new version has completely stolen its identity. I'll do my best to help keep the game alive with a digital version on TableTop Simulator, and that's really all I can do. But with that being said, I am at least glad that I was able to finally piece together this absolutely bonkers tale for you all to enjoy. So if you ever find yourself being threatened by a major multi-million-dollar corporation, just remember your good buddy Ralph and go for the gosh dang jugular. Because even if you miss, you might still hit the Ninth Circuit Court and win that sucker anyway. Signing off for being anti-Monopoly, I am KamSandwich. Thank you for watching and have a fantastic day. A special thank you to my suppliers, staff, and chefs over at the deli, as well as the media preservers helping me get these rare games ported for the public to enjoy. If you'd like to join the crew, you can take a look using the link in the description below.